Hi, I'm Clary Jaxon, and in this video I want to talk about the Harvey Weinstein trial. I want to talk about the parallels of the We Believe the Children moral panic era from the 1980s and 90s in the United States and in Canada, probably the UK as well. All of this is applicable basically to any common law justice system, Western justice systems, adversarial justice systems, criminal and civil. This book I'm going to start with was written by Richard Beck, and he wrote this book. When did he write this book? In 2015. And I'm going to read the foreword because it's pretty much the summation of the story of the book. So during the 1980s in California, New Jersey, New York, Michigan, Massachusetts, Florida, Tennessee, Texas, Ohio, and elsewhere, daycare workers were arrested, charged, tried, and convicted of committing horrible sexual crimes against the children they cared for. These crimes, social workers and prosecutors said, had gone undetected for years, and they consisted of a brutality and sadism that defied all imagining. The dangers of babysitting services and daycare centers became a national news media fixation. Of the many hundreds of people who were investigated in connection with daycare and ritual abuse cases around the country, some 190 were formally charged with crimes leading to more than 80 convictions. It would take years for people to realize that the defendants had said that, as the defendants had said all along, that these prosecutions were the product of a decade-long outbreak of collective hysteria on par with the Salem witch trials. Social workers and detectives employed coercive interviewing techniques that led children to tell them what they wanted to hear. Local and national journalists fanned the flames by promoting the story's salacious aspects, while aggressive prosecutors sought to make their careers by unearthing an unspeakable evil where parents feared it most. Using extensive archival research and drawing on dozens of interviews conducted with the hysteria's major figures, N+1 editor Richard Beck shows how a group of legislators, doctors, lawyers, and parents, most working with the best of intentions, set the stage for a cultural disaster. The climate of fear that surrounded these cases influenced a whole series of arguments about women, children, and sex. It also drove a right-wing cultural resurgence that, in many respects, continues to this day. All right. If you want to understand what's happening with the Harvey Weinstein trial, start with this book, all right? Especially if you're an American. Now, in Canada, for my Canadian followers who watch my videos, we have the same stories. We have the McMartin preschool trial equivalent. We had that in Saskatoon in the 90s. That's actually, funny enough, called the Martinvale daycare panic hysteria, where all the children were pulled out of their homes by CSA agents to tell stories and play with dolls to, make it look like people were doing sex acts with them, in front of them, with other kids, whatever. All of that ended up, for the most part, proving fruitless. There was no evidence at all that proved that these crimes occurred. And of course, their statements are considered evidence. As we know today, this is the way our courts operate. Statements are evidence. Testimony is evidence. Yes, that is true. However, there's a thing called quality of evidence. Quality of evidence. So first we start with the direct testimony of a complainant. Then we have cross-examination, where things that they said in their direct statement are challenged. And then a lot of times in cross-examinations, the real truth comes out. Then we have witness statements. these witnesses can be a variety of things. They can be a support witness that actually saw the crime occur, and they tell their version from their perspective what they witnessed. Another type of witness statement can be a prior bad act witness, and that is somebody who has nothing to do with the complainant's testimony or story, material-wise in any way, but they also tell a story of something similar that happened to them in the past, that allegedly has the hallmarks of the same crime committed by the complainant or committed against the complainant. Therefore, the person on trial may look more guilty because of this story that sort of seems to tell a similar tale, although it doesn't do anything to prove the complainant's statement. It does nothing to prove the complainant's statement. So those are witness statements. And of course, those types of witnesses are also cross-examined. And again, their statements are challenged, and oftentimes you actually get the real truth. You get to the truth of the matter through cross-examination. It becomes a little more clear. Then the other type of evidence you have is physical evidence. That could be photos, documents, video recordings, audio recordings, anything, again, that goes to prove that a crime occurred. For example, a murder scene. You have CCTV footage of somebody being stabbed in an alleyway. That would be admitted as evidence, as physical evidence. That is physical evidence. Then the next category of evidence is forensics. Forensic evidence. Now, for example, expert testimony or expert analysis. For example, that CCTV footage, you may have to explain what's happening in that footage, have it analyzed by a forensic expert who can, again, point out certain hallmarks in the video that prove A, that the crime happened, and B, prove that the accused person is in that video, or maybe prove the type of weapon, or prove the way he was killed, or whatever. Just, you need an expert analysis to explain what you're seeing in the physical evidence, or to help the jury or the judge interpret what they're seeing in the physical evidence. So in a way, the forensic evidence is supportive of the physical evidence. All right, so you have complainant witnesses, and then you have other witnesses that support the complainant evidence. Then you have physical evidence, and then you have forensic evidence that supports the physical evidence. Now, those are 4 categories of evidence that help prove that a crime occurred, prove that the assailant is the person who's on trial, and prove that the victim, whether they're alive or not, is actually the victim. So it just basically, it's okay, yes, this crime occurred. Was it a crime of passion? Was it predetermined? What was the intent? Was it accidental? Was it malicious? Were there more people involved? Things like that help determine the severity of the charges this person is going to be charged with or convicted of. Now, when we're dealing with sex crime cases, such as Harvey Weinstein's, and as I read earlier in the We Believe the Children book here, we're dealing with a much lower quality of evidence factor. Because remember the 4 categories: complainant, witness, physical, and forensic. You're going to be missing the physical evidence, therefore you're going to not be able to back up or analyze physical evidence with forensics. So because the physical evidence has been removed from the category, essentially from the evidence category, you lose 1 point right there as far as quality of evidence goes. So now you only have forensics that could potentially analyze the testimony of the complainant and perhaps witnesses. But again, usually we don't have witnesses other than the complainant. Now, I know in court often the complainant is referred to as a witness, but for argument's sake and identification purposes, I'm always going to separate complainants from witnesses, because in sex crimes, we always have a complainant. They're alive to tell their story. So the complainant and the witness, in sex crime cases, again, we don't have witnesses because, as we all know, or as the mantra goes, sex crimes always occur without witnesses in private when nobody knows. Well, that might be true. But you know what else is true? There's a gazillion other crimes that can occur without anybody noticing, and no witnesses have seen anything. So let's just throw that out the window, because that means nothing. It has no bearing on why we are prosecuting sex crime cases the way we are. It's a myth, all right? It's a myth that's been propagated over the years, and I'm going to tie that back to this issue here in a moment. But let me get back to the quality of evidence issue. All right, so quality of evidence, when you have a sex crime case, whether it's a child or an adult, whether that adult is complaining of childhood sexual abuse from decades ago, which we see in our courts, maybe not so much in the US because statute of limitations still exist in some states. But in Canada, we have no statute of limitations, and neither do they in the UK, which means that I, for example, can go to a police station and say, somebody diddled me 40 years ago, and they'll write up the report, take my statement. They'll ask me, if I know anything about the perpetrator, where to find him, what his name is, blah, blah, blah. And they'll go find him and pick him up. They'll just kidnap him. He won't get any warning. He will not be called in for an interview. It just doesn't work that way in Canada. So he just gets kidnapped by the police. They might surveil him for a while before they kidnap him. But so that's how it works here. All right. So back to the quality of evidence. We have the complainant. Now, what backs up the complainants? What supporting, corroborating evidence do we have for a complainant in a sex crime case? Typically, it is some sort of psychologist or psychiatrist, or a forensics psychiatrist or a forensic psychologist, whichever you want. People that work in the legal field, people that typically act as experts in legal cases, or who consult, who are legal professors in a legal environment, tying psychology, like Dr. Barbara Ziv, who is a notable forensic expert that testified at the Harvey Weinstein trial. She also consulted, as far as I know, I can't recall if she actually testified at the Bill Cosby trial, but she consulted at the very least. Then you have other people, for example, Elizabeth Loftus. Her sole focus is memory and the law, and she's been doing that for 40 years. So she's a highly, highly credible psychologist when it comes to that kind of stuff. She consulted and testified. And she testified to the whole misinformation effect, which in her own experience over the years, she saw a lot of misinformation and a lot of influence on the part of psychologists, social workers, children's advocates that helped the prosecutor office craft these bizarre satanic panic ritualistic abuse stories. And oftentimes the kids, initially when they were interviewed, they didn't know what the heck they were talking about. They didn't know, nobody touched me. No. But then as time went on and they had multiple interviews, they kept coercing and coaching these kids to say things, and then capturing that very important sentence that they've been waiting for with the hook word that they need, the legal word, touched my penis. Bam! As soon as the kid says that, who cares what the context is? That is all they need in order to proceed with them as a witness, or a complainant, I should say, for these types of cases. Now, the parallels, I know you might think I'm off my rocker. I'm comparing apples to oranges with, children's satanic panic ritual abuse stories. And then adults, like the adults in Harvey Weinstein, they're not telling satanic ritual abuse stories. No, they're not. But there are many parallels. First of all, there are always civil litigation lawyers waiting in the wings, because as soon as these cases wrap up in criminal convictions, then those civil litigators can sue the schools, the school board, the county, the municipality, the government for not doing enough to protect the children from abuse. Things like this, all right? So we always have these civil attorneys waiting in the wings, ready to pounce and sue for millions of dollars. This has been going on for decades. This is nothing new. In the Harvey Weinstein case, same thing. Gloria Allred is right out there. She's full front and center, doing media scrums every day after the trial, even during verdict watch. We're still on verdict watch as of the making of this video. And it is their first weekend after deliberations. They get to go home, think about their verdict. Monday, February 22nd, I think, or 23rd, we may get a verdict, who knows. But anyway, as of the making of this video, there's still no verdict, so everybody's on the edge of their seats. Now, one of the major problems that I have with this, and that I'm sure most of you watching this, maybe people watching this don't really understand how the justice system works, but I hope you're watching to learn something. So the problem is that we have a major deficiency in quality of evidence in this case. The prosecutor has built Harvey's case in such a way to make it appear that so many different women have said so many different things about Harvey that therefore that is supposed to prove that each woman's individual story is true. I don't know about the US, but in Canada, that's actually illegal. You cannot do that legally. You can't pose a witness during trial and say, look, they have something similar to say about this man, especially from 30 years prior. And even though there's no criminal charge from that alleged allegation or alleged event, and therefore, because she says it happened to her, that proves the truth of the matter of the other complainant. You can't do that in Canada. It's an illegal move, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. There may be other ways that you can use that witness, but the point is that the way the prosecutor is using these witnesses in the Harvey Weinstein case is really slimy. And I understand that there is a precedent, the Molineux witness, that allowed the prosecutor to use these witnesses in the way that she's doing it, highly unconventionally. And we in Canada would not allow a case to be built the way the prosecutor in this case has. She's Aluzzi has adopted this Molineux precedent, and from what I understand and what I've read about this, is she completely has mischaracterized and misinterpreted the use and the purpose of that precedent. Now, mind you, in Canada, I see we do that all the time in our cases. We see prosecutors and judges constantly reinterpreting precedents just to skewer somebody, just to see somebody go to jail, just to give the victim, the alleged victim, their, satisfaction of seeing this man go to jail. I see it all the time. I read about it all the time, and I've seen convictions overturned because of it. And therefore, you end up with a new limitation on the use of such precedents. Whether or not that will happen in the Harvey Weinstein case, I really don't know. I would imagine it will be fought for if he is convicted. There will be appeals that will definitely be focusing on the Molineux issue. For some reason, the judge and the prosecutor were working together and pretty much allowed every sneaky move the prosecutor wanted and demanded in order to ensure Harvey Weinstein looks like the boogeyman that this whole book revolves around. And all of the satanic panics of the 80s and 90s had the exact same flavor of oh my God, so many people have said so many things about this man, that then it compounds, and then you have a whole other group of people that are like, oh, he's a monster, put him away, he's disgusting. Okay, Harvey Weinstein cheated on his wife, but I think some of these girlfriends came along before he was even married to this woman, his wife. So I don't know to the extent he actually cheated on his wife, but that's not the point. The point is none of that is criminal. And the other point is that the quality of evidence in this case is so lacking. The Barbara Ziv presentation is, in a nutshell, yes, sex crime cases will lack quality evidence, and the only evidence you have to rely on is the complainant. The complainant will often easily be challenged, caught in contradiction, caught in lies, but when it comes to sex crimes, we're expected to reinterpret those contradictions and lies as evidence of trauma, because there's some chemical reaction that happens in the brain that, causes these women to contradict themselves, be caught in lies, tell incomplete stories, perceive things differently, yada, yada, yada. Basically, these are all the hallmarks of what actual criminals do. So, in the Harvey Weinstein case, what this case is showing you is that the criminals are the people taking the stand every day, telling their stories of whatever supposedly Harvey Weinstein did. And the people that put them on that stand and helped craft them as a victim that they are not, are equally creating a crime and manufacturing these victims. You heard it. One of the witnesses, Tarale Wolf, I believe, the prosecutor referred her to a memory therapist or a trauma therapist, and she had 55 sessions before she revisited the prosecutor's office, and the prosecutor said, all right, your recollection seems much better now. We can use you and put you on the stand. Tarale Wolf is also represented by Gloria Allred, if I understand correctly. So is Lauren Young, and actually, I might be wrong about Tarale Wolf. Nonetheless, she still has a civil litigant representation. Whatever. Some great advice. Yeah. Anyway, Lauren Young, Annabella Shora, and Mimi Halle. They're all represented by Gloria Allred. And all of those women were presented with communications with Harvey Weinstein that they had after the alleged rape or rapes, whatever. Except for Annabella. Annabella had a whole other bizarre story. Something about a Valium hat. She was photographed wearing a Valium hat at an Oscar celebration. And her response to why she was wearing this Valium hat was because it was a cry for help, because she was addicted to Valium because of Harvey Weinstein. Wow, what a stretch. Now, if you believe that, then, I'm actually Robert Redford. Yeah, right? Okay, so anyway. Now, I shouldn't be laughing because, a lot of people are kind of taking this whole thing as if it's a movie production. I mean, look at the context. Harvey Weinstein, one of Hollywood's biggest movie producers of the time. He made the best movies. I've seen most of them, lots of them. However, I must note, he did distribute The Hunting Ground, which is the most disgusting piece of propaganda that one of the most disgusting piece of propagandas that I've seen that is helping to influence and drive the entire Me Too movement, but in the terms of campus sex assaults. The Hunting Ground was, gosh, I can't even find the words for it. But it implicated people who turned out to be proven innocent, and it sympathized with women accusers who were proven to have lied, and I believe one of them was even convicted and imprisoned for it. So in a sense, one could say, well, Harvey Weinstein's a monster just for doing that, and this is his just desserts. This is the problem with human nature, is that we look at somebody, we might think they're ugly and disgusting and fat, which is another thing that has been happening a lot in this Harvey Weinstein case, is the body shaming and everyone assuming that because he looks so repulsive, which I might not think so, somebody else might not think he's that repulsive, but regardless, the point is, he's been developed as this boogeyman. And if you don't go along with the fact that he's too repulsive that any woman would ever willingly want to have sex with him, then you're a rapist sympathizer. That's where we're at in society today. And it's really sad and it's really disturbing. And, here's another book. All right, another book, Wrongful Allegations. This book was written by a group in Oxford, UK. Wrongful allegations of sexual and child abuse. So it's not just child abuse, but also, women making claims. And this book is a more recent book. I think it was 2016. And this, breaks down the history of he said, she said, low quality evidence cases and people being convicted and what has led the justice system to this point, the impact on the people who've been falsely accused, whether or not they end up with a conviction or not. It doesn't matter, although when you get convicted, things get a lot worse. A beloved advocate for survivors of false allegations, Simon Warr, who was also a BBC reporter at one time. He was also a teacher historically. He recently just passed away this morning, actually, very recent. 65-year-old man, he fought for 2 years, false sexual allegations, and it went all the way to court. He was luckily acquitted, but nonetheless, he pretty much devoted his life after that to write a book, for example. Simon Warr is presumed guilty. If you are interested in this topic and learning more about how the justice system has evolved over the years to convict innocent people for non-existent sex crimes based on creating the boogeyman effect, creating a moral panic, trying to create the impression of sex ring cabals, pedophile rings, VIP rings, all of this stuff. This one book is an example of one man's struggle, and it's really detailed in terms of his interviews with the police. It's really shocking. I had a really hard time getting through some of it without having to stop reading it, for either because it would make me cry, or it just makes me so angry. I personally have also been affected by a wrongful allegation and a wrongful conviction. Not me myself, but somebody very close to me. And somebody I love very much, and somebody who never deserved it. And so I feel triggered, if you will, when I read other people's stories that tell very similar things. Now, in Canada, for the Canadian context of how our laws evolved to allow what we do in our courts today, this book is a must-have. The Most Dangerous Branch, How the Supreme Court of Canada Has Undermined Our Law and Our Democracy, written by Robert Ivan Martin. You need to make sure, because I believe there's another book on Amazon also called The Most Dangerous Branch, but it's a totally different book, totally different writer. So this is the one you want. This explains how the Canadian system evolved. So basically in the 80s, we literally created a reverse onus in the legal system. Sorry, I should say this is 80s and 90s. It started in the 80s, and then it progressively worked up into the 90s, where all kinds of legislation was enacted and criminal code, evidence act stuff changed to deprive accused people of the ability to make full answer in defense, Also to deprive the public from being able to observe these trials. They all take place in private for the most part. And again, the reverse onus. So basically what the laws in Canada have done, which is similar to the US, as you can see demonstrated by the Harvey Weinstein case, is they've made it extremely difficult for the defendant to provide documentation to add context, to do things such as show why she's not credible or show context of potential motive. Things like this are really difficult nowadays. So it's been a deliberate effort over the years to make it much, much easier for people, civil lawyers, to make money. And keep in mind, it's the civil lawyers that end up making the most money, but it's also the criminal justice system itself. These cases keep the wheels of justice turning. It keeps the defense lawyers busy. It keeps the court systems busy, the clerks, the judges, the prosecutors. Now, keep in mind, though, these cases are very minimal compared to other crimes. This is another thing, is there's this overall sense that there's rape happening everywhere constantly. It's rampant, and that we're never going to be able to keep up with it, and that it's not true. That's just not true. It's actually one of the most least amount of crimes on the books. The most amount of crimes are robberies, thefts, private property, or property crimes, right? Crimes against property, whether it's fraud, money, finance, or physical houses, buildings, whatever, robberies and things like that. So the muggings, simple assaults, those are the crimes that are through the roof. And these are generally people that are just, they're street people, they're gangbangers. They are looking for drug money or things to sell in order to get drug money. They want to make the quick buck by dealing with guns, drugs, whatever, or defrauding people. Now, civil attorneys do the exact same thing. They're literally extorting people, but they do it walking that fine line, that gray area between legal and legal, illegal and legal, right? We've seen Michael Avenatti, a lawyer, recently just get slammed for extorting Nike. He crossed the line somewhere. He was sloppy. So he got caught, he got prosecuted, and he got convicted. Gloria Allred, she has always managed to stay just on the edge. And, but however, there's a lot of things she does that is questionable why the law allows what she does. For example, the way she parades and does her daily interviews with the media, basically speaking for the prosecution. Meanwhile, the defense have been gag ordered not to talk to the media at all. How is that fair? How is that fair? Well, because she's not an actual party to the case, there you go. Technically, she's not, because her complainants, her witnesses, whatever, these women, as far as I know, haven't signed an actual retainer. She's taking them on pro bono, but this is what they do. Because Gloria has a bank account filled with gazillions of dollars. So, she's got plenty of leverage to just sit around and wait for the right opportunity, get a criminal conviction, then the class action lawsuit can be filed. And then what will happen is hundreds and hordes of more women are going to come out of the woodwork. And this class action suit might have, say, 500 women claiming Harvey Weinstein did all this stuff to them. What's going to happen if they settle. They never go on trial. I don't think Gloria Allred has ever done a trial. She just settles. That's the other disgusting thing, right? It's legalized extortion. And then, whatever settlement, let's say she wins $100 million settlement. Well, she gets half of that. At least half of that. And then the rest of that gets divided up amongst the 500 women. What's going to happen? They're all going to bitch and complain because they only got a $100,000 check. They thought they were going to get $1 million, but they got $100,000. This is what happened in the Larry Nassar case. Larry Nassar, the gymnast, physiotherapist, I suppose, who treated all of the young gymnasts, managed their injuries and all of that stuff. Same thing happened in his case. After he was convicted, this massive class action lawsuit was launched against the university that he was part of, and the women weren't happy because the final settlement, which the women were probably initially suckered into the settlement with some big numbers, but by the time the case got to settlements, the numbers whittled down quite a bit. That's how they work. That's what happens. So by the time, all these hundreds of women join the suit, the lawyers take their cut, and then they have to divide up what's left over, and they get an $80,000 check. They're not happy. You can look it up. So this same thing is going to happen. Gloria Allred is just there for the game of it. She doesn't even need the money anymore. She's going to drop dead any day. God help us all when that day comes. My final words, I suppose, on the Harvey Weinstein case. If you believe that women should have their day in court, make a complaint, and have their statements weighed and believed, you are propagating the fallacy of the justice system, and that is that quality of evidence matters. That quality of evidence is what saves innocent people's lives. It is what saves companies from being looted by less than ethical but borderline illegal, but still legal, little civil litigation attorneys. To believe that these people should have their statements weighed as, credible or not credible, that's not how the justice system was ever meant to work. Ever. And now here we are, all of the burden of proof, the standard of proof to prove guilt has been dramatically lowered to a civil court standard, if you will. Preponderance of evidence. It was more likely than not to have occurred, because why else would she be sitting there up on the stands telling us this story if it didn't happen? That is the most naive way to think. And if you think that that is enough, what she's saying makes it likely, because where's the proof it did occur? Where's the proof it did occur? That is what you need in order to put somebody to jail, but not anymore. Most of the public think that's what you need. So if Harvey Weinstein gets convicted in this case, people are going to assume, well, there must have been some smoking gun evidence somewhere that proved he did it. No, I've followed this case every day. I've read all the transcripts. There has been no smoking gun. In fact, the smoking guns that do exist in this case are the evidence that points to his innocence. But we have experts like Dr. Barbara Ziv who says, no. Don't look at it that way. All of that, those lovey-dovey emails, all of that sending him my phone number, all of that stuff, it means nothing. It is absolutely normal to carry on a friendship, a lover relationship, a business relationship with your rapist after the fact. Completely normal. That is what the jury has to believe in order to find him guilty. Because otherwise they're ignoring the mountain of evidence that actually proves Harvey Weinstein did nothing criminal. That's where we are. And these books that I was telling you about earlier, if you want to look up, there's all kinds of other books, and there's documentaries online all over the place. Just Google satanic panic ritual abuse. You're going to find all sorts of cases and stories that'll blow your mind. And I wanted to also point out that this case actually has an element of that. There were two things that jumped out at me. One, it was in Mimi Halay's evidence, when she was saying that she, while she was allegedly being raped in Harvey Weinstein's Soho apartment, she was thinking about the limo driver, and whether or not he was waiting outside of his apartment, and whether or not they were organized enough to do what? Capture her? Make sure she doesn't leave the apartment so that Harvey can rape her? He's basically his right-hand man who helped deliver his victim to his apartment. That sounds really conspiracy theory oriented, doesn't it? And there was another witness who also said something similar. That was Lauren Young, I believe. And her evidence was that an assistant of Harvey Weinstein, a Mexican model named Claudia, if I remember correctly, she also did the same thing, delivered her to Harvey Weinstein, locked her in the bathroom with Harvey Weinstein, locked the door from the outside, which is unheard of, and allowed it to occur, allowed him to molest himself, apparently, in front of her while he groped her. So these are hallmarks of people who have had some sort of seed planted in their head that there's a VIP conspiracy, there's a sex ring cabal, an organized sex trafficking, all of this nonsense. This is the exact same level of thinking as the satanic panic ritual abuse, hysteria, and moral panic. It's the exact same thing, and they're after, they keep trying to connect Harvey to these other people that they want to say, see, there's the proof. You can connect Harvey with this guy and that guy and this guy who's under suspicion, previous conviction for some other thing, some stupid thing. And, all of this is evidence and proof that there is an organization, it is organized, and that Harvey Weinstein is, the controller of it. He's the boogeyman, and he must be put away because of it. It's utter nonsense. There's no proof of this at all. All it is it's conjecture, speculation, circumstantial inferences made because of associations. It is no different than saying, well, the man that never leaves the house, that lives in the forest and never leaves his house, he must have dead bodies in there. He must be cannibalistic. He must be plotting to destroy the world. Give me a break. Where's the proof of that? Anyway, the point is, we've been putting innocent people away for years based on low quality of evidence. Now, if you have a problem with the Harvey Weinstein case, you should not just be focusing on the circumstances in the context of his case. Overall, we have a major problem in our criminal justice system. As far as I'm concerned, it is illegitimate, has lost all respect, has lost all my respect, and it should lose all the respect of the people as long as you have lowered the quality of evidence bar just to get a conviction, just to prove a story that so many people have spent so much time developing and creating and crafting and, pinning their hopes, their future on the success of getting a conviction in this case, even though there is no evidence to support any crime occurred. That is what you should be concerned about with the result of this case. If there's acquittals, that's great. We still have the same problems, though. The problems don't go away. If there's convictions, the problems will just continue as is, but will be made even worse. And the moral panic, the hysteria is just going to go through the roof, because the mob is going to be taking their pitchforks and looking for the next person to connect with him and put him away in the same way. And it's just going to dominate the media. It keeps the media busy. It keeps the news cycle focused. And it keeps the justice systems focused, because they get to spend their days building their case, referring people to trauma therapists to strengthen their memory and recall so that they can have a better witness to put on the stand. This is terrible. This is not the justice system you want. It's not the justice system I want. It is a justice system that can knock on your door any day without any fair warning that you're next. Your husband is next. Your brother, your father, your grandfather, your uncle, your best friend, your coworker. You know, everybody is vulnerable. And people really need to speak out more about this. Cut through the clutter of, but the victims need their day in court. No. If they want their day in court, keep it to the civil system. And if there are rules that bar it from the civil system, then don't go to the next, don't abuse the justice system that way. Don't look for the prosecutor that's going to help you abuse the system that way. Because I fear for our future generations and our kids today. This is the society that we're growing up in. The one thing that I can recommend you do if you're an American or a Canadian, well, if you're an American, write to your senators and tell them you have a concern about the quality of evidence in your criminal justice systems. Be very frank and use what I said at the beginning of my video, or everything I've said in my video. Use that to summarize your message to them, to make your point that the quality of evidence that is being presented to convict innocent people, most likely innocent people, you have a problem with that and you want legislation to fix it. Come up with your own idea, write your own message, but base it around that concept that you have a problem with the quality of evidence and the lowered bar for standard of proof to convict people in our criminal justice systems. Canadians, you can do the exact same thing, but write to your MPs telling them that. Thank you for watching and listening.